about 350 across the world today. And it's just really been fun to sort of see a company grow on the same mission I spent my career on.
Hi, my name is Amias Gerety. I am a partner at QED Investors, so we're a large global fintech-focused venture firm. I run U.S. early-stage investing, so my job is to rub the foreheads of founders and see whether they're growing baby unicorn horns. You got to kiss a lot of frogs, I guess, to mix metaphors. Anyway, so when I was in government, I was in a bunch of different roles at the U.S. Treasury Department. So I was a political appointee. I served every single day of the Obama administration. I started working on Dodd-Frank when it was a blank sheet of paper. I created the staffing function underneath the FSOC, and then I was the acting assistant secretary for financial institutions. And glad to give whatever spiels are helpful to understand how to go from one to the other.
Some pep talks. Yeah, great. Thank you. Cleve.
Hi, Cleve Mesidor. I'm the executive director of Blockchain Foundation, another Obama appointee. I previously served in Congress. I worked for Betty McCollum from Minnesota and Barbara Lee from California, and then left to serve in the Obama administration. I was the director of public affairs for the Economic Development Administration. And if you'll remember, during the first administration, we had to create jobs. And interestingly, it was working at Commerce as a political appointee that opened me up to innovation and entrepreneurship. Many people don't realize that while Bush retired the space station, we were tasked with actually figuring out what to do with not just the space program, but also the workers. And we looked at advanced manufacturing. And at that time, that was a lot of innovation. And we had to figure that out, how to create jobs, but also how to help counties, become more competitive from an innovation perspective. And interestingly, it was during the Obama administration in 2013 that I first learned about Bitcoin. In 2013, a friend had a Bitcoin project and asked me to help with a press release. That press release opened up this world for me, and Bitcoin stayed in my radar. But I did not go down the rabbit hole until 2015. There's a movie called Dope that I was just like, oh, I get it now. And then I went down the rabbit hole, and in 2016 decided to leave politics and go work in the crypto ecosystem in New York. So I've been working full-time in this space since 2017, when Bitcoin hit $20,000 for the first time. And then I came back to DC to work in Washington politics when the Blockchain Association was created in 2018, started working with Kristen Smith and worked with the Blockchain Association for the last few years. Interestingly, in 2018, they also created the Blockchain Foundation as well as the association. So since 2022, I've been the executive director of the Blockchain Foundation, a 501c3 that was created in 2018, but we focus exclusively on education, being a bridge to the institutions that Washington trusts.
Cool. Matthew.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Homer. I'm the general partner of the venture department. We're a pre-seed and seed stage fund focused on stablecoin infrastructure, tokenization, and DeFi. And I lived in DC for about 10 years and have been in New York for the last 6 years. I had 3 roles in government. I was with the FDIC, USAID, and the New York State Department of Financial Services.
Hi, everybody. Michele Korver. I am the head of regulatory at Andreessen Horowitz, large venture capital fund that's US-based. And I'm in the crypto fund specifically, where we have about 100 more than 100 blockchain-related investments. My time in the government, similar to Aries, was working in law enforcement. I started fresh out of college, actually at the Secret Service, down in the Miami field office. I'm working on counterfeit and then financial crimes. And then after going to law school, was in AUSA in 2 different offices for the bulk of my career. Like you, Cleve, I kind of just fell into crypto. I had an agent that I'd been working on cases with who walked in my door one day and said, there's this place called the Silk Road and this stuff called Bitcoin. Does that sound interesting to you? And I said, yes. And so I, for years, worked on money laundering and drug trafficking cases in the early days. And found that I was fascinated with the technology personally, And it was, of course, interesting and complex as a lawyer because the laws weren't developed, the procedures on how to handle things weren't developed. And so then I ended up going to the money laundering section at Main Justice and help them develop policies and procedures for how to charge cases, what to do when you seize it, how do you legally forfeit, crypto. And from there, I went to FinCEN, where I advised the director across all of the divisions on everything related to digital assets. So I've been out for 3.5 years. I stayed in the government way, way, way too long. I will say, from a financial perspective particularly, but I was having fun, and I really, really loved the mission, and that's what I was driven to do. But now I like to say that I worked in the dark before, and I really, really loved the dark, but now I get to work in the light because my job is to help entrepreneurs know what the lanes are, follow the law, have successful businesses that are not going to run into problems with either law enforcement or regulators.
Okay, thank you all. I appreciate that overview. To set the tone for our panelists, you guys have some anonymity because the lights are very bright. And so I wanted to just see, like, by show of hands, can you raise your hand if you have previously worked in a government capacity, public? Okay, pretty good mix. Cool. For my friends on stage, I'm going to do a similar exercise here. I wanted to know whether any of you, when you joined the government, just by show of hands, whether you thought you could be a public sector lifer, like get to the pension at the end, retire at some age, and never have kissed the soil of private enterprise. Like, did anyone you think, like, lifer? Okay. Michele, what changed?
Once I started working on policy, because I had always been, for most of my career, an investigator and a litigator, and I worked in kind of certainty about what the rules are. And once I started working on policy, and then I had to interact with political forces that were driving things, I got really frustrated. I had good intentions to push things forward with the experience that I had for the policies that I thought were meeting the objectives. And for me, I think I just got frustrated and decided that it was time for a change, as I had made throughout my career inside the government, to something outside.
Okay, so for the rest of the panel, who who saw it as something of an inevitability, Ara, do you want to go?
Yeah.
Why did you not think that this could be the rest of your life? Did you always intend to go private?
Sure. So quick shout out before I get into that, though. I mean, Michele, I know, went through her bio, but don't tell David Sachs, but Michele was the first crypto czar. There was no one working on more important issues in this space as early as Michele was. And I think the thing that I've loved most about my last 5 years at TRM is watching so many folks in the audience who raised their hands just now, and the friends on this panel, and we are all friends, do this thing, right? Where you had this incredible run in the government, you did all this work, and then you get to build something really extraordinary in the private sector. For me, honestly, I wanted to be an AUSA forever. I clerked for a federal judge in North Carolina, and I looked down in that courtroom every day when I was 23, 24 years old, and I said, I want to be those guys. Not because they were prosecutors, but because they were trial lawyers, and they were out there in the middle of the courtroom, holding up evidence and cross-examining witnesses, and it was this really extraordinary thing for me. Probably why I love the theater as much as I do. And when I got to the U.S. Attorney's Office, finally, I did realize pretty quickly that my bosses weren't doing that. I was getting to do that. Honestly, at the U.S. Attorney's Office, D.C., I got to do it hundreds of times, which was absolutely extraordinary. But I knew that I always wanted to be an AUSA and never wanted to be a supervisor. I think once you start to realize that, that's when you say, all right, is there something after this?
Cleve.
I will add that for me, there was this, everyone has heard of the EGOT, right? People in entertainment, they get all these awards. Well, I started my political career working on political campaigns, working on governors' races. Then I heard that there was this EGOT where you had to get campaign experience, work at the White House, work on Capitol Hill, and then there was a third one. So I actually, that was my goal, right, is serving in the administration, the Obama administration, worked on Capitol Hill, and then once I had done that, I was done. I got my EGOT.
Okay, good. I think that's an excellent transition to my next question. I think there is a certain amount of expectation built into the public sector that eventually you're going to go private. And I'll never forget a conversation I had with a regulatory lawyer who had gone private in like 2017. I was very, very fresh, like green in the reporting beat. And I asked him, I was like, why did you leave government? Because he talked about it with a lot of fondness. And he said, well, I have 5 reasons, and their names are Jamie, Sharon, Elise, John, and so on and so forth. I change the names every time I tell that story. Let's talk about the money, because sincerely, I mean, like, we're up here, we're having the conversation. But I wanted to hit it from the backside, which is on the government side. Like, obviously, government has benefits, but like the compensation does not compete with the private sector. Matt, what is your view on like what? Not to put you on the spot, but what is your view
This is
on
the problem with having a journalist as the moderator for this panel.
I could have been such a stinker with this one, and I'm trying to be nice. Listen, Matt, what do you think happens if we pay government workers more? Like, is that the root of the problem, or do you think that the landscape is pretty stable for what it is when it comes to like the benefits and the pay and that kind of thing?
A few thoughts. So one is, look, my last government role was in New York City. If you think federal government pay is bad, try New York State pay, and then try living in New York City, right? I mean, the urgency like to earn more money comes like very quickly, right? But look, I think it depends where you go in the private sector. Frankly, if you go to a startup, you're probably not actually going to be earning that much more. I mean, you do have kind of the possibility. I mean, you have different forms of compensation. You may have some equity, right, that could amount to something, or could not amount to anything, right? But I think that I don't know if I'm going to really answer your question, but here's what I think. I think we need like far greater talent mobility between private and public sector. I actually think that. I think we need a lot more. I think part of the reason we're in the problems we're in today is because we don't have enough. I think there's sort of an idea that's emerged that government and private sector are sort of necessarily in opposition, at least in a lot of cases, which I don't think should be true. I think we should be working together to achieve a common set of objectives. The reason that's relevant is because I think if you had a lot more talent mobility, you'd have a lot of people who'd come into government for like 2 years, right, do service. And most people, when they go into government, I don't think yes, you want to be able to support a family, but you're not really motivated by the pay. I mean, I never, that's not why that's why none of us served there, right? So I think people actually are willing to take sacrifices to work in government. I think the pay should, it should probably be updated and should reflect kind of the private sector pay for sure. But I think the government can still attract good people.
Let's talk about the skills that you guys took from the public sector and brought into the private sector in any capacity. I'm curious, Amias, I might go to you. Amias, what do you view as your critical edge, if anything, after coming out of the public sector into the work that you're doing now?
So I'm not sure how much is the specific public sector experience and how much is the frames of mind that would make anyone successful to begin with, right? So, look, a lot of people come and ask me, like, oh, how do I get into venture capital? And roughly speaking, although Matt has a better track than I do, like, there are 3 ways to get into venture capital as an investing professional. You can get or be rich, right? That's it. Like, most venture capitalists start by being rich. Okay? Josh Kushner, fantastic venture capitalist. How do you think Josh Kushner got into venture capital? Right? Okay. Number 2, you can work your way up in a big firm. And it is a professional industry now. You can work your way up. Or dumb luck. Like, those are
Well, you got to be delusional too.
You can be a little, yeah, absolutely. But people say, well, okay, how do you actually succeed? Well, like, I would say that if you are lucky enough to actually be in government at a time when you are able to make policy. And as Michele talked about, there are a lot of times when you can have even very senior government roles and just fundamentally there is no policy being made. But if you are lucky enough to be in a seat where you get to make policy inside of government, you are practicing a frame of mind which is making very consequential decisions with much less information than you would want. And that is exactly the frame of mind that allows startup executives, startup founders, venture capitalists to succeed. And it's being comfortable with that discomfort that ultimately is, I think, a big transition. But actually, if you've been a policymaker, you have to have felt that discomfort or you weren't doing your job right.
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I would add, and I think it's picking up off of that, the skills that I learned working in the Obama administration, serving on Capitol Hill, I continue to use today. And those skills are how to do research, how to put a memo together, how to brief my principal, how to get ready for going to the White House when this is probably going to be our only time going to the White House for something. Those are limitless in terms of their utility. So I tell people all the time, I remember I started my career at CNN's Washington Bureau, and I had to do clips as a news assistant. To this day, I'm thankful for that because I know how to research and make sure every morning I know what's happening across the crypto spectrum. So I do think that people don't realize what you learn in terms of doing those memos prepares you for success in any career. I may not always be the smartest person in the room, but I'm always going to be the most organized. And my stuff is going to be tighter than anyone else because of working in government.
This is a slightly different take, and it's not as much skill set, but I'll tell you, relationships, and you all know this, are absolutely everything. And I had amazing relationships when I was in the government for almost 15 years, mostly because these were just amazing people on a mission. First at the U.S. Attorney's Office and then at Treasury. And when I got to TRM and we were 6 or 7 people, I was sort of the head of legal, I realized very quickly that this is not a company that needs a lawyer. Like, we need to be out there. People need to know who we are. And my friends in government kind of all knew that and rallied around. I talk all the time about careers as a team sport. And if you build those relationships, particularly in the government over the years, I don't think I've ever told this story publicly, but I have a podcast. It's called TRM Talks. I hope some of you listen. But the genesis of that, of TRM Talks, and it started literally 5 years ago this week, is that I was leaving the government, and Jessie Liu, who was the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia and now is an amazing partner at Skadden, reached out and said, "How can we help you? This thing you're doing is crazy, but it's so cool." And she's like, "What if you guys what if we do a webinar and you sponsor it?" And I said, do we have money? We're a really early startup. How does that work? And our CEO, Esteban Castano, was like, "You should do this, Gerety. Let's do it." And Jessie said, "Well, who do you want to come on?" And I said, "I don't know. Let's do it about the cryptocurrency enforcement framework," which was just written at the time. Michele had a huge hand in that at DOJ. And one of the primary authors was a guy named Sujit Raman. Sujit was an assistant attorney general doing cyber work, former AUSA. And so he came on, Jessie came on, and I reached out to my friend Chris Jancheski, who was probably the foremost crypto investigator in the world. And I said, "Do you want to come on?" And Chris said, "No, why don't you have my boss?" So we had Greg Monahan, and that was the first ever TRM Talks. Chris came on the second one. Chris and Sujit are now both at TRM, are two of my closest friends. And it's this kind of idea where the relationships that you build over the course of time are really the most important thing, and just have such a huge impact on your career.
Michele, I want to go back to you for this next question, which gets into, I think, the misunderstandings about the dynamics of going from public to private or from private to public, just because you've been on both sides, as have you all. What do you see as maybe the areas or the misconceptions that frequently come up with the dynamics associated with going back and forth? And I guess, what are people missing when your clickbaity journalists focus on the pay and things like that? I mean, what is the big
Journalists.
What do people get wrong?
I think they get wrong. Ultimately, you have people at the top making the important decisions and kind of the decisions that are the big ultimate questions on things, but I think that they don't realize how important kind of the staff level people are who are actually doing the work. Those are the ones that actually, in my experience, have a lot of expertise, particularly for the blockchain space, in the technology and understand the technology. And I think that it's important to not overlook talking to and having relationships with people who may not be the one in charge, but actually is the person who's going to be writing the memo and will understand the argument probably better than maybe their bosses that you're trying to make, and maybe might become your advocate for whatever position that you're trying to put forward. So I think kind of the blanket, they just don't understand the technology. I think there are lots of people, unfortunately, making like really important decisions we've seen through the years that maybe didn't understand the technology in a way that they should have to make those decisions. But I think to say that in a blanket manner is really is not correct, because I think there are a lot of people that are working on whatever their task is within the government that really do understand this stuff on a granular level.
Maybe just to do some, I think like, for those of you who are in government or who are thinking about leaving, you have been told that you could double your salary and you're doing this big sacrifice. And I'm not telling you that's not true, but I am going to tell you that the idea that you can work half as hard and make twice as much is mostly a myth. So every time someone comes to me for advice, I ask them the following 3 questions. You don't need to answer these questions for me. Answer them to yourself in a mirror, or with your spouse, or with someone else. So the questions are you willing to sell? You have a network, but are you willing to put that network to work? Some people will answer that question and say no, right? Are you willing to move? If you don't want to leave DC, then the universe is much less open to you. And the third thing is, how much risk are you willing to take? If you are willing to be employee number 6, there's a million startups that are looking for employee number 6. If you are only willing to be the general counsel and get paid twice as much, there's a much smaller number of startups that are willing to do that and let you live in DC, right? So you have to take seriously, I would say, not just the true benefits of working in government, but also the true trade-offs of moving outside. Like, there are a lot of people who came to the Obama administration with us after 5 or 6 or 7 years as law firm associates. And it is true that their peers who, while we were in the Obama administration, became partners at the law firms, were in many cases making twice as much, but they weren't working half as hard. And they were doing work that was, in many cases, very unpleasant. It is not fun to be a first-year corporate partner. It is not fun. It is more fun to be a senior advisor to the Undersecretary for International Affairs, right? And so there is real dynamics there. So that's the biggest myth I think you do have to take seriously, that the twice as much, half as hard, like, if you find it, let me know. But it's much less out there than you think.
Amias set me up very well for my next and maybe last question, which is about the job market in DC. I mean, obviously, with the Trump administration's moves, with rifts earlier in the term, Doge, rifts happening right now amid the layoffs, whether or not those will hold up in court. There's a very good argument to be made that the DC job market is in a recession, and it's a very difficult time to get work in the federal sector. How are, I guess, pieces of advice from each of you would be great as to, I'm guessing, the federal employees who are not here in an official capacity but who are watching from home on the stream, like, what is your message on how to navigate this pretty perilous moment for the sector?
So sorry to double up here.
Do it.
I'm an avid vibe coder, and this spring, and also plug, my wife does career counseling and resume, like, so this is what she does. Anyway, so a friend came to us and said, like, you've got to do something. And so I literally built, and I'll send it around if people want it, but you can find it on LinkedIn. I built a resume analyzer. It is free. It has been used by more than 200 people. It's been used almost 700 times, and all it does is choose a job description, upload your resume, and it will literally write you a 1,500-word set of notes about where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses, and what some of the interview questions are going to be. So that's the first. So you can have all my advice. It's embedded in a prompt, and you can apply it to yourself. But so anyway, I'll stop there. But plug there. It's on LinkedIn. It's free to use. I'm very proud of it. It's pretty janky, but it's good.
Ari, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that we're talking to people all the time. Every day someone reaches out from the government, former colleague in the federal government, reaches out, say, hey, how'd you do what you do? And, can you help? And I try to treat it very transactionally. And that is like, hey, my network is your network. Particularly if you were someone I worked with at DOJ or at Treasury. And what are you passionate about? And I think that's really the first thing to think of. Like, don't think of like, hey, these are the open roles out there in the world. Like, what would I be excited to do next? Who has that job? And then you start to sort of go from there. I would say in this very specific moment, be open to different types of opportunities, everything from that early stage startup up through a large financial institution or a law firm. I think the points earlier about sort of what to expect are really, really good. Look, I mean, I do not make much more money today than I made in the federal government. There's tremendous upside when you're talking about building a startup, but like absolutely, who knows? I've never worked harder, and it's not even close. But I've also never had more fun, and that's not even close. So I think these are all sorts of conversations you need to have with yourself, but also sort of just look around the world and say, hey, who has a job that I'd be really excited about having, and then work from there. That's the place I think you got to start.
I was just going to add on something Amias said. I think that actually location can make a big difference. And I think that I lived for 10 years here. I absolutely love DC, but I think that if you live in the DMV, it does color how people view you right outside the DMV. And like even if you're trying to depends what you're trying to do. If you're trying to do something that's very not government, they're going to view you as government if you live here, even if like you're doing something totally different. And so I do think being open to other locations makes a big difference. I've been in New York for 6 years, and I'm really glad that I made that move.
I would add that for the people who are in a job search, right, who have lost their jobs or who are transitioning, it can feel tough. But I would say to look to entrepreneurship. When you look at COVID, it was a dark time. It drove a lot of people out of the professional marketplace because they had to be home and take care of parents and children. But entrepreneurship was where they looked to. So right now, we're here, we work in the crypto space, and emerging technologies are very accessible to people. They don't require a degree, and they don't require for you to be technical. So I would love for people to explore blockchain and cryptocurrency, but all of the emerging technologies, when you're looking at entrepreneurship, as been mentioned, there are startups, but don't just think about, startups at Silicon Valley or Austin or even New York. There are small teams across El Paso, Las Vegas that you can join or even create your own projects. But I would say definitely look to entrepreneurship because emerging technologies, technologies are looking for problem solvers, and there's a role for problem solvers. And folks who can say, and I think you mentioned take risks, say, I'm gonna start a project and build on my network and expertise.
One thing just real quick, that's a really important point, and that is, look, I think it's really interesting. I mean, resumes mean very little to us at TRM, to be honest with you. It's not about what you have done. It's about what you're capable of doing. And I think it's a little bit of a different mindset than I had in the government. We do an on-site where you literally do an hour-long presentation to members of a certain team on a prompt that we give you. And it's just a little, so I think thinking through like where are your expertise, Cleve's point about developing new expertise potentially that's more relevant to the market, where you can sort of really wow a group on the what is possible, what you can do. I think that's probably the path to success in the private sector, which is very different than the way we thought about it in the public sector.
Just to defend the government a little bit, I actually think there's more similarity on exactly the dimension that you. Now, it depends a little bit on our culture and role, but I look at what people were able to do in the government as way less hierarchical than most private sector opportunities, not startups. And so I actually think, underscoring your point, Ari, that the question everyone wants to ask is, will you solve my problem tomorrow? By the way, if you go into a big bank and you say, I want to be your head of customer success, they will say, show me that you've been a successful head of customer success at 10 different places that are exactly the same as mine. You'd say, well, if that were the case, why would I want this job, right? But if you go to a startup and you say, I can solve a problem you have tomorrow, that is a lot like government. Who's going to win this case for me? Who's going to be able to get this? Who can be up at 3 a.m. negotiating with the Hill, et cetera? So I do think that if you focus too much on the government part of your experience, you can sometimes miss the thing that brought us into government, which is the mission and the passion, and the thing that Ari said about it's because of that mission alignment and that passion. And so if you're going to the private sector, it is a big gulp. But if you can communicate that you have an authentic passion for that person's project, they'll give you the shot that Ari just talked about. Oh, you want to be with me? And going to Matt's point, you want to be with my little startup? You believe in me? Oh, well, now we're friends. Now we're friends.
I think the gulf from government to private, like tech sector, let me put it that way, maybe actually less than from big bank.
I agree.
I think that, to your point, in government you actually have autonomy. I mean, you have an opportunity to do a lot of things that you couldn't do if you're in a big, huge bank bureaucracy. I think it's harder to go from, if you worked at Citibank for 30 years, apologies if anyone here has, and then you're trying to go into a tech sector, I think that's a much harder transition, actually.
Matt, just to call you out a little bit here.
Okay.
No, but just from a government perspective, right? Like, we got to know each other when you were at USAID.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was the acting assistant secretary for financial institutions, which meant that, like, by any read of the org chart of the U.S. federal government, I was in charge of fintech. But Matt Homer decided that he, not senior executive at USAID, was going to be the fintech guy.
Yeah, I don't know if I decided that, but we can keep going.
But anyway, but my point is...
Actually, I was the fintech.
Great. But look, I mean, you took an initiative, and you made yourself a person inside the federal government because you took an authentic interest, and you took the time, and you went out and you learned, and like, you became a person that, like, I, as like a whatever at Treasury...
Bigger deal.
Yeah. You know, whatever, like... And all my dasses were like, this is Matt Homer, blah, 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 you know? And I was like, but so I think that just to really underscore that you already in government had the same cast of mind towards entrepreneurship. And I think if you tried to tell that person, if you tried to tell that story as a story about your success in a bureaucracy, I'm not sure it would resonate. But when you tell that story about entrepreneurship and passion and sincere interest, I think you can see how it's the same story of you.
I want to go to Michele for our final thought on this.
I am a huge fan of executive coaches. I've used a number of them throughout my career, both when I needed to make a big transition within the government and then when I was going out. You want one that is part therapist and has the skills to help you, figure out really to get out what you really are looking to do. And then, of course, has all of the practical skills of tailoring your resume for the industry that you're applying for and all of that. The one thing I will say for any of the govies that are out there on the stream, I think that spending that money is worth it, particularly because if you've been in for a while, you lose the knowledge to, how do I negotiate this? You're in a different startup environment where the compensation looks very, very different than you ever saw either as a government employee or as a law firm partner. And so having that help, there's fabulous professionals. I don't know your wife, but, and my husband is not a coach. I don't have a husband. My dog is my therapist. But I definitely would recommend executive coaching if you're looking to make a really big move.
Okay, I think we're going to end it there. Please give our panelists a big hand. This is a great conversation. Really appreciate all of you for dealing with my snark. And thanks so much for showing up. We'll see you soon.
Well, I just have to say, I thought I was the fintech guy when I was in government, but apparently no. All right, we are going to break for lunch now. On the 5th floor, there's some phenomenal swag. So get some swag and get lunch. We will be back at 2 o'clock for the next panel. Thank you so much.